Welcome to Good Questions, Good Answer. Today, we have another interesting question from our audience again. And with the help of our Venerable Sander, who is joining us regularly now this time. Venerable Sander, are you there?
Yes, I am. You are loud and clear,
All right,
and
thank you.
thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for helping us too. Now, many people, especially from the Western side, are not familiar with this kind of term when they have to apply situation in life about being with equanimity. These are the new terms that many people are not used to. So that's here come today. What do Buddhists mean? Here come today. What do Buddhists mean when they say equanimity? So, Venerable Sander, can you help us clarify this term a little bit for our new audience and the regular?
Yeah, so equanimity, or in Pali language, upekha, is a word that is not usually used in the West much. It's very much thought of as a sort of abstract philosophy or a religious term, not used much. So this is a word that is very important in Buddhist culture, though. And we often can see in Thai culture that people will tell each other to have practice more equanimity, or to, as they say in Thai language, wang cheri. So this is a common term in Thai language. And then why is it so alien to our culture in the Judeo-Christian Western culture?
Right.
That's hard to answer, but it's for sure that it's worthy to study more.
Well, so can you tell us a little bit where are these terms from, or how do they get to apply? Maybe a little bit for those, maybe a little clarify for those who are new.
Yeah, so equanimity means that it can mean several things. It's usually talked about in the context of the four sublime qualities.
Okay.
And these four sublime qualities are loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. The first three are about the heart. These are the sort of qualities that are about love and care. And then there is equanimity, which kind of makes it more balanced. You could say it's like the head and the heart coming together.
Right. So can you telling us about a little bit about this equanimity? What does it mean?
Yeah, so I haven't still not explained exactly what it means.
Yeah.
Well, equanimity, when we really study about it, it's not that strange. It's not something which is completely strange or alien to our life. When you are a parent and you have to take care of your children, we have to be impartial, for example. We should not favor one child more than the other, right?
Yeah, right.
When you are a judge and you have to make judgments about criminals, what kind of punishment will they receive, or whether you are part of a jury that has to make such judgments. That all requires us to be impartial. Impartiality implies that we have equanimity of mind. We do not we do not allow our mind to be led by favor, like or dislike.
Right.
It's of course not very deeply and profound yet, but it's the sort of basic form of equanimity that we are familiar with when we need to monitor ourselves to make sure that we do not use our likes or favor and dislikes when we are making any judgment about anyone.
Oh, it sounds very complicated because this is more applied to reason than using our emotion or our heart. So maybe this is something you
It's
practice
both.
a lot.
I think you cannot exactly separate, equanimity is about reason as well, but it's also about emotion.
Can you
Right.
can you go a little bit more in detail about being impartial?
Being impartial is so there's a difference here. You might be confused. Being impartial is about how you relate to people. So when you give leadership to people, when you take care of people, when you have people in your care, then you need to not be biased to them, especially when there's more than one person, of course. If you are a mother with a single child, you take care of all you can, to that person. But if you have more than one child, you have multiple children, then you need to really make sure that you don't favor anyone more than the other.
Mm.
There is different ways we can be biased when we are in a leadership role. When we are led by greed, for example, is something that can happen. For example, you make certain decisions which are biased because somebody paid you. This is what we call corruption.
Yeah.
Or this is sometimes it can happen that you, for example, you get rid of an employee because you don't like him. That is hatred. Or because he's a foreigner, you saying that all foreigners are bad and they're not the same as the people of your own country. That's an example of delusion. You're not seeing things as they really are, because nationality cannot determine a person's worth. So, and there is fear. Fear is very widespread. We might, for example, want to lay off or get rid of an employee because we simply are afraid that if we don't do so, we will come under pressure of our own boss, even if that employee hasn't done anything wrong. Or there's other examples we can mention, but these are the basic principles of not being biased. You're not led by emotion or distorted way of looking at reality.
I see.
This is, of course, difficult to do when you are not enlightened yet.
Yeah.
We all have biases sometimes.
Yes.
But by monitoring yourself and being mindful, we can prevent it to some extent.
Yes.
And that is why at the very basic level of equanimity, we have to use our ratio, our reason, as you said. And it will not come very naturally yet.
In this part, is there anything else that equanimity can be applied in our life besides just only being impartial?
It's also about learning to know when you can't help, when you can't help. So sometimes we want to be kind to everyone. We want to be compassionate to everyone. And this is very good. This is very praiseworthy. This is a very good thing to pursue. But sometimes we can't help everyone. We cannot always help everyone.
No, we cannot.
So, for example, if you have a friend, for example, who is an alcohol addict, then you cannot use an alcoholic, you can't always help them through. They need to do it by themselves. You can give them a push or a pull, but eventually they have to take responsibility for their own lives. Even the Buddha, he said to his disciples, his students, that he only shows the way, but the people have to walk themselves.
So it's like everyone have to help themselves too, and they have their own choice to choose. So therefore, we cannot help everyone, but first we have to help ourselves. Life are, always up and down. It is something that we cannot control. So that's something we have to maintain our stability of our mindfulness.
Yes. So sometimes there is gain, sometimes there's loss, the Buddha says. He actually talks about 4 pairs, the worldly conditions. That's not something that makes a lot of sense to English language speakers. But you could say they are the sort of vicissitudes of life, or the things that make our lives go up and down. Gain and loss, credit and discredit, praise and blame, and pleasure and pain. These we all have to go through, whether you are very wise or very foolish. We all have to go through this. Whether you are enlightened, even enlightened people have to go through these 4 pairs in their lives.
Well, they are the nature of this world that no one can escape. It is something we must live on with that.
Let me just clarify one more thing. If we talk about the ups and downs of life.
Oh, okay.
There is. So I mentioned that being impartial is about how you relate to other people.
Okay.
But then there are also the ups and downs of life that we might have to face, and that is when equanimity comes in as well. We sometimes have to deal with when our life goes wrong, we lose our job. This can happen to everyone.
Yes.
Sometimes our reputation suffers. When we
Right.
talk about your reputation, it's the second pair. When we talk about criticism and praise, this is the third pair. And the fourth pair is about sometimes we become ill, sometimes we are healthy. This is very recognizable by many people now. There is a lot of uncertainties in life.
Right.
And we have to understand that is part of life. We cannot just ignore it.
No, we cannot.
There is no superb medicine or cream or some sort of instant karma that can help us escape from these ups and downs of life. We can just make the graph a little less peaky, make the ups and downs a little less extreme. But well, or you could say it more positively, we can make the downs a little less and the ups a little more. But eventually, you know, we all have to face the ups and downs. They're part of life.
Yes, it's part of our life. Sin is the nature of our world. So sometimes we cannot escaping this. But still, by developing equanimity, this can help us overcome and live on with this change in our life. So still remain, how do we develop them though? Right.
Well, there is the power of thought and there's the power of not thought or not thinking. The power of thought is something not to underestimate. When we often reflect on something, it is a way of teaching ourselves. We can often reflect that all things in the world are impermanent.
Right.
We have a very nice car right now, but you know, tomorrow it might sometimes get into an accident or something. It might get damaged. We have a very nice wife or girlfriend, but we do not know when people become ill or when we lose another person. If you don't lose them, you know, eventually we have to leave the world anyway when we ourselves become older and we die from this world. And that's what makes all things around us, the material things, the things around us that are outside of us, even the people who we love, ultimately cannot really satisfy us fully. We have to find real satisfaction into our own mind's nature when we have learned to find happiness, when we train the mind in stillness and stability. That is the second reflection that we should often reflect on. Okay. Many of the things around us, whether people, things, they are not really making us happy. They can just be conditions making us provide a favorable environment to practice ourselves to be good human beings, but they cannot ultimately make us happy. And they might actually be very boring, making us we might get fed up with them. You know, if we like our favorite dessert, we like very much, right? But suppose you get it every day, would you still like it?
Well, too much is not good, I guess.
Yes, if you get something every day, you just eventually you're gonna be completely fed up with it.
Yes.
And that's the nature of all things. A Dutch poet once wrote that there is a charm in everything that is lost eventually. And that is part of life. Now, the third reflection is that all things in the world are subject to change, which is very similar to the first. But it just emphasizes that some things, even though we might not lose them today, but they will change eventually, you know. And everything changes all the time if you look very fundamentally at our lives.
Correctly.
So the fourth quality is with regard to our relations with others and reflecting that ultimately everyone is responsible for their own happiness and suffering, as I already discussed before.
Yeah.
So if we often reflect on that, then we won't make the mistake of overly trying to help other people change their lives when in fact we better spend our time changing our own lives and improving our own lives which is often much more urgent to do. And eventually there is also another power I mentioned before, that we use the power of reflection, the power of thinking, to improve our wisdom, our equanimity, but we should also use the power of not thinking, which is when we still the mind in meditation. And this is what is eventually the most powerful form of equanimity, simply to learn to look at our thoughts, observe our thoughts without analyzing, without trying to push them out or pull them in, just looking at our thoughts and guiding our mind to the center inside, and then we find peace and happiness. And because we are not led by our thoughts, then eventually likes and dislikes, favor and fear will not have so much of an impact on our mind. It will in fact become less and less strong. And that is the real most powerful path to equanimity.
This reminds me of what we have discussed earlier in the previous episode about the daily reflection that can help us overcome and letting go of things in our life. That's like soon later we have to depart from everyone, sooner or later we all must die, something like that. However, all of these are the power of reflection that our mind trained to letting go. But in the detail it is on the mind training directly, which is meditation. And the mind, when it finds comfortable feeling, it don't want to attach anything in itself, it just enjoy its freedom. So this somehow that can gain you the equanimity feeling that arises in your meditation. This is from what I think it could help to help them understand. You see, when you come with the thought about reflection, you put it on into action, and then it come into your mind and do meditation. That's a good pattern. So, well, by this practice of meditation, is there any tip you would like to advise our audience about how can we gain equanimity by practice of meditation?
Yes, so I've listened to many recordings of our abbot and teacher, the Venerable Dhammachayo, and he has actually gave many examples of how to practice equanimity in meditation. For example, he said, be friends with every experience that you have. Whatever experience happens, be friends with everything that happens. It's like you understand that your experiences might sometimes be better and sometimes be worse. Be friends with all experiences. And the other thing is, which he mentioned, is be just like a tube through which your thought passes like water. I think this is also a very vivid explanation. Or which one, the one I very much like as well is, your thoughts are like the clouds or the birds in the sky. And that's really very helpful, because your mind feels spacious and open, and your thoughts are like the birds or the clouds that pass through. That is a very helpful metaphor that helps you to develop equanimity, allowing things to happen, not always trying to be in control. We are actually unlearning the habit of trying to be a control freak. We simply allow things to be in our meditation, and that makes us very happy.
Well, the thing is that this kind of reminds of what you just mentioned earlier. Simply letting be is kind of like we cannot control everything, so we just have to let it be. Well, thank you very much for telling us about the tips of meditation. How can we apply it and practice equanimity? But the thing that's still not clear to me is, how can you tell difference? Can you tell the difference between equanimity and ignorance? Somehow I got confused because they are very close.
Yeah, the outward appearance is similar, but it's actually quite different, fundamentally different. When we are indifferent, like for example, if you have indifference in your heart, right? If you are ignoring something, or you don't want to know about it, as they say, ignorance is bliss. That is a different kind of emotion, a different kind of attitude altogether. When you have equanimity, you know there's a person sitting in front of you. You want to help him, but you can't, because you know it won't help at that point anymore. You have to let him go. You have to allow him to find his own way. That is mindfully letting go. But if
Oh.
you just don't want to help somebody, you're just not looking at them when they're sitting and begging on the street. You don't want to help any beggar. You don't want to help your neighbor because you're simply too lazy, or you don't want to see their suffering. You're afraid of it. That is indifference. It's not the same. It's
I
very
see.
different. It comes from a sense of not wanting to see reality, which is another way of describing ignorance.
Ah.
And equanimity, on the other hand, is really seeing the suffering, but knowing that you can, at some point, you cannot always help people to relieve them from their suffering. Sometimes you have to wait, or you have to allow these people to find their own path. So that is very important. On a similar notion, sometimes we have a good job, sometimes we have a bad job, sometimes we have financial stability, sometimes we have lack of financial stability. That is part of life. That is recognizing that is equanimity. But simply saying, well, I'm not going to try to build up my career because I don't really care about anything at all, that is indifference. You know, we all need to have financial stability in our lives. Okay, you don't always have to be the CEO of a big company, but we need to work on that our lives are stable financially, you know.
Okay.
So that is the difference between equanimity, which is based on wisdom, and indifference, which is not based on wisdom. Also, equanimity goes hand in hand with loving kindness. It can go hand in hand, and indifference can never go hand in hand with loving kindness because it's not based on mindfulness or awareness at all. So that's the difference.
Do you have any example that can share, making us a little bit more understand about this equanimity?
You know, if we often think about it, it's helping us to be more stable in our lives. If you have a job in which you're sometimes praised by people, as a monk, for example, you are, then you have to think about it, you know. Don't forget, there's always a graph that goes up and there's a graph that goes down. Don't forget, there is always the ups and downs in life, and it makes you more mindful. There's a story that I would like to talk about. So there's a sentence, a phrase in Latin, which is very familiar to those who often go to church. But originally, it's not a Christian phrase. The phrase is memento mori, which means be mindful of having to die in the future. And this is, of course, also part of the reflection of impermanence that I already mentioned. And this phrase, contrary to what many people think, does not come from the church, from the Bible, but is older than that. It comes from Greek-Roman history. And there's a story that in the past, whenever the leader of the army in the ancient Roman times, the ancient Roman Empire, they had made a victory, they had won a war or won some kind of conquest, they would be celebrated. There would be like a sort of triumph, a ride of triumph when they went through the city, and everyone would celebrate the leader of the army in that way. It was a sort of encouragement for the army to perform. And the leader of the army would be, in that way, would receive a lot of honor. But sometimes it happened during the history of the Roman Empire that the leader of the army, because of all that praise, because of all that all those people who were encouraging them and feeling very happy with their victory and their conquest, that sometimes the leader of the army became rather. They started to think of themselves as the new leader of the country, and sometimes they took control. They tried to get a coup d'état. They tried to take control over the country, over the Roman Empire. So this became a problem. They couldn't just cancel the ride of the triumph or the ride of victory of the head of the army. You know, they had to continue that tradition. So they decided to come up with a new plan or a new custom. Every time there was a leader of the army that had made a victory, that had completed a new campaign and had become victorious of the enemies, had conquered a new territory or something like that, they would ride through the city and the audience would still cheer them up, would still be very happy. Everything would be the same, but there would be a little man standing behind the leader of the army, sort of like a jester or a joker. And this man would say to him all the time, memento mori, memento mori. Remember, you must die. You see all these people cheering you up? Don't forget that now you might be cheered by people, but don't forget you one day have to die. You are not a god. You are just a human. Look behind you. Look behind you what you once were. You were once a common man. You were once a normal man. And our lives change all the time. So by this wisdom, the leaders of the Roman Empire were able to prevent the leaders from the army to become arrogant and take over the country by military force, by simply allowing a person to remind them in a very important moment in their lives that even though you may be on the top of the world, you will always have to come down, because that's the nature of life. And if we realize that, we won't invest so much of our happiness into outside circumstances. So I think this story illustrates and helps a lot. And even up to this day, the word memento mori in the Catholic Church refers to thinking about death and reminding yourself of the impermanence of things. So that is a very interesting story, I think, from the ancient Roman Empire.
That is quite new to me, and I think it's very interesting because this custom is quite very relating to our life in the Buddhist country or in the Asian way, that we have to remind ourselves all the time not to get overjoyed of our triumph or our own success. Well, this is something that can helping us understand about the true nature and easier letting go of whatever that we come, and eventually it will go. So this is something that can help us understand and develop equanimity in life. And so everyone, we hope this answer about equanimity can bring benefit to you and also improve your quality of life, especially by practice meditation. The more we practice, the more quality of our mind will be improved. And thus, we will find peace in our life quite easier than before. Thank you very much, Venerable Sander, for helping us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we hope to see you again on our next question, everyone. See you again next time. Good questions, good answers.
Thank you.